Mine be the dear lyre and bended bow, and I will utter to men the unerring counsel of Zeus. Such are the first words of Apollo, hardly out of his mother's womb. Apollo, god of light, protector of the arts, patron of the divine and of the prophets. The sun beats down on the newborn babe, or rather babes. For next to Apollo sleeps his twin sister, Artemis. All around them an arid and desolate landscape. This island where their mother, Leto, the goddess of the night, finally found refuge, is truly a stone. Just a single tree, a palm tree, the silence, and the sea, stretching out to infinity. Leto's face relaxes. 9 days. 9 days before deliverance came. 9 days of suffering after 7 months of wandering. And all that was whose fault? Zeus, of course. Zeus, who might have been called the god of adultery if he hadn't already been given the title of Master of Olympus. Zeus and his innumerable feminine conquests. Poor Leto. For how long did the king of the gods harass her before stealing her virtue? Indeed, she might have guessed that this affair would end badly. Leto pulls her twins to her side. She remembers. How could she forget? A few months earlier, she announces to Zeus that she is pregnant. The master of the gods explodes with joy. This boy, for it will no doubt be a boy, will be the most valiant of all his children, the most handsome. Leto does not share her lover's exuberance. Indeed, she is very worried, for Zeus is married, and not to just anybody. His spouse is called Hera, and she shares his sovereignty over heaven and earth. Not only is she the greatest of all the Olympian goddesses, but she is the protecting divinity of marriage. And infidelity is something Hera doesn't like in the least. Deception is no joking matter for her, pitiless not only with her rivals but also with the children they bring into the world. Of course, Leto could have pointed out that she hadn't wreaked havoc in an otherwise untroubled union. A short time earlier, the heavens had been witness to another clash. Having learnt that Zeus was on the point of committing a new infidelity, Hera had called upon Athena, Poseidon, and numerous other divinities for help. Together they had tried to chain Zeus. Alas, the project failed, and it didn't take long for the Master of Olympus to retaliate. As Hera was at the origin of the conspiracy, Zeus suspended her over the clouds, an anvil attached to each ankle. Despite her cries, no god dared come to her aid. Zeus only accepted to release her on condition that all the conspirators vow never to rise up against him again. Leto's fears turned out to be justified. Zeus's cries of joy upon learning that his mistress is pregnant have reached as far as Hera's chamber, right up there on Olympus. Yet more deceit. This time, the goddess promises, her anger will know no bounds. To start with, she threatens bloody reprisals against anyone who offers Leto asylum. Next, she calls up a monster from the depths of the earth. Python the serpent. And she sets it on the heels of the unfortunate woman. And so begin weeks of wandering for poor Leto. Abandoned by all, desperate, she goes from land to land and from town to town, looking for a place where she can bring her twins into the world in all safety. But her path is strewn with closed doors and evasive glances. No one dare brave the anger of Hera. Leto struggles on, begging, until, already stricken by the first pains, she reaches a little island in the Aegean Sea by the name of Asteria. Asteria, that was the name of her sister. She too had once suffered Zeus's advances. But rather than give in, she had thrown herself into the sea. At the place where she fell had appeared the island of Asteria. Leto seeks refuge on the island which was once her sister. She lies down at the foot of a palm tree. She first gives birth to a girl, Artemis, and then a boy, Apollo. So here he is, this magnificent god, this god of light, of music, and of poetry. 7 days later, and he's already out of nappies. He's already a superb boy with extraordinary strength. Zeus sends him a 7-stringed lyre, a chariot pulled by 2 powerful swans, a bow and arrows specially made for him by Hephaestus, the god of blacksmiths. Immediately, Apollo decides to leave. He has a fixed purpose in mind: to be the one who reveals to mortals their destiny, as well as the intentions of his father, the mighty Zeus. But for that, he must find a place where he can build his temple. Apollo climbs onto his chariot, leaves the island, which, suddenly becoming fertile and green, takes the name of Delos, the Resplendent. But the swans who pull his chariot see things in a different way. They carry their passenger off to their own country beyond the north wind, the land of the Hyperboreans. It's a magic country. The gold that is found here is guarded by griffins. The people here are rich, happy, and never grow old. Here, Apollo is initiated into the mysteries of Zeus. Then he continues his journey. He arrives at a splendid spring lost in the middle of a deep forest. The place is guarded by a nymph. Her name is Telphusa. When Apollo informs her that he intends to build a magnificent temple here, the nymph, offended that a greater divinity has come to compete with her, persuades him that the place, though beautiful, is terribly noisy. She sings the praises of another site very close by, at the foot of the gorge of Mount Parnassus. Apollo sets off again. He doesn't know it, but the nymph has just laid a trap for him. A few hours later, Apollo discovers a magnificent valley. The place does indeed seem perfect, but hardly has he started to mark out the foundations of his temple than a shadow silently slides up behind him. Python, the terrible serpent who was already hunting him in his mother's womb, Python had been here, awaiting his hour of revenge. The combat is incredibly violent. Apollo's triumph is absolute. Yes, but he killed a god all the same. Gaia, the Mother Earth, who gave birth to this monster, is furious. She immediately reports this offense to Zeus. Zeus orders his son to go to the Vale of Tempe to purify himself. Apollo does more than this. He establishes the Pythic Games in memory of his beaten adversary. But what is a sanctuary without a priest? While looking out to sea in meditation, Apollo suddenly notices a vessel which seems to be in trouble. He leaps into action, takes the form of a dolphin, and reaches the boat. On board, he finds that the Cretan sailors are half dead from hunger, thirst, and fatigue. He promises to save them on condition that they accept never to go home and to faithfully serve him. Apollo leads the boat to shore and initiates the sailors into the divine secrets. On the pediment of the temple, he has the words, "Know thyself," engraved. An errant god, roaming the countryside, Apollo undoubtedly understands better than most the profound meaning of this maxim. It remains to find a name for the place. The sailors, turned priests, remark that it was in the form of a dolphin that Apollo had appeared to them. Dolphin, Delphis in Greek. Apollo approves. The site will be called Delphi. Delphi is soon to become the most venerated place of worship in all Greece. People hasten there from the four corners of the earth to know the destiny reserved for mortals by the gods. For that, one needs to question the oracle of Delphi, the famous Pythia. It is through the mouth of this oracle that the god is supposed to express himself. For the moment, the time of wandering is over, and the time of power can begin. Apollo makes a triumphant arrival on Olympus at the assembly of the gods. He is at the height of his glory. Alas, everyone has their dark side, even the gods. And although with his lyre Apollo enchants the immortals' stay, with his bow he renders men's lives impossible. And one quickly discovers that behind the delightful poet who frolics with the muses hides a bloody and violent archer. A queen, the arrogant Niobe, will learn this to her cost, and she won't be the only one. Niobe reigns over the town of Thebes. She had once been loved by Zeus, but had not deigned to give him children. However, Niobe was fertile. With her husband Amphion, she had brought into the world no less than 14 children. One day, spurred on by jealousy and grievance, Niobe boasts of her prodigious fertility and taunts the goddess Leto, who only has 2 twins, Artemis and Apollo. an unpardonable offense in Apollo's eyes. While Niobe's children are accompanying their mother on Mount Sipylus, Apollo approaches them and, without any qualms, bends his bow and lets fly his arrows. 14 arrows, 14 children. Total carnage. We can only imagine the immense sadness of the unfortunate Niobe. Prostrate, she refuses to leave the tomb of her assassinated children and bewails them day and night until Zeus, taking pity on her, turns her into a rock streaming with tears. A paradox of this strikingly beautiful god, he is always disappointed in love. The women to whom he is most attached always escape him inexorably. The most famous of these unconquered women is the nymph Daphne. Daphne spends most of her time hunting. However, one day, Eros, the young god of love, who Apollo constantly teases for his weak archery skills, decides to play a game on the proud seducer. He pierces Apollo's heart with a golden arrow, which makes him fall in love with Daphne. Then he strikes Daphne with an arrow of lead, which renders her insensible to love. Apollo tries to court Daphne, but she obstinately refuses him. To avoid the god's persistent advances, she flees. Apollo chases after her. The nymph plunges through the forest until, as her strength fails her, she collapses onto the bank of the great river Peneus. With Apollo only a few steps behind her, Daphne fervently calls upon her father, the god of the river Peneus. And the god hears her. In a thunder of water and spray, Peneus surges out of the water, and with the point of his scepter touches her breast, just at the level of her heart, right where Eros's arrow had struck. The beautiful Daphne feels her members stiffen. Her fine tunic slides from her haunches and her body suddenly becomes covered with rough gray bark. Her arms stretch out into branches, her hands become vines. Her blood turns into sap and her ankles enroot themselves in the warm grass of the riverbank. Her father has just changed her into a magnificent laurel tree. Apollo rushes to her, but too late. He can only grasp the smooth, frozen trunk. Under the bark, he feels Daphne's living heart beating. Beaten, broken, Apollo picks a branch from this laurel and decides that from now on, a branch of this sacred tree will decorate his lyre and adorn the heads of poets. Turbulent, violent, it is time for somebody to bring this overtly impulsive god to heel. Who could be better placed than his father, Zeus? Apollo has just fallen in love once again. Her name is Coronis. She's the daughter of the king of Thessaly. Apollo and Coronis are happy. Coronis carries the god's child. but the princess, still pregnant, unfortunately falls under the charm of a simple mortal, a certain Ischys. It's a raven who the god has employed to watch over this beauty, who informs Apollo of this treason. His anger is, as always, implacable. Apollo starts by killing the poor raven, who, originally white, becomes black. Then he kills Ischys and Coronis. At the moment when the body of Coronis, laid out on the funeral pyre, is about to be consumed by flames, Apollo snatches from her breast the still living child. This child is Asclepius. Apollo is shaken by this fresh tragedy. Once again, he has lost the woman he loved. But he still has the child. Asclepius learns the greatest secrets of medicine. And soon, he proves to be so gifted that he personally discovers the most incredible and insane remedy, the dream of humanity: how to resuscitate the dead. And he doesn't hesitate to use it. Asclepius resuscitates Orion, Hippolytus, Tyndareus, and then Lycurgus. Hades, the master of the underworld, is furious. What is happening is very serious. Asclepius is shaking the order which reigns between the gods and men. It is out of the question to let him carry on. Hades protests to Zeus. The master of Olympus shares his anger. Asclepius has gone much too far. So, without hesitation, Zeus strikes down the medical genius with a thunderbolt. Apollo is in despair. His own father has dared to take his son. To take vengeance on Zeus, Apollo targets the Cyclops, those one-eyed creatures who had forged the thunder for the master of Olympus, and assassinates them one by one. Zeus is furious. This son is clearly uncontrollable. Zeus dreams up the worst way to punish him. Throw him into Tartarus, that accursed corner of the underworld. But when Leto intercedes, Zeus agrees to soften the sentence. Apollo will become the slave of a mortal. For 1 year, he will serve the king of Thessaly as a simple shepherd. All is tragedy in the life of this god. All is complexity. Even in his loves, which are not limited to the feminine gender. For Apollo also loves men. 2 of his lovers come to dreadful ends: Hyacinth and Cyparissus. Hyacinth is accidentally killed by Apollo, who, to honor him, turns him into the flower. As for Cyparissus, in despair at the death of his favorite animal, he begs Apollo to put him to death. The god refuses, but faced with his friend's insistence, turns him into a cypress tree. One has to recognize that there's a certain genius in this god who, though unhappy, still finds the strength to lend beauty to sorrow. So, far from the clichés which depict him as a solar god, a god of purity and of beauty, Apollo cultivates paradoxes in the same way as mortals do. He is both shadow and light. Apollo is the god of many faces.